And hello, this is Howard Klein with CRE Radio and TV. Click here at any time to view the post on Periscope. So we're doing a new thing. So maybe this is streaming live to Twitter, and we're trying out a new thing here. So in any event, today we're going to be talking about the retail apocalypse. Here is my cohort. Could be a cohort. Here's my co-host. Should be that way. Hold it.
There we go.
No, that way.
That way.
It's in reverse. That's right. Peter Morris. Peter, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, Howard, always a pleasure to be on your show as your co-host. Cohort, perhaps, but co-host, definitely. I'm Peter Morris. I'm the founder and CEO of the Greenstead Consulting Group. We are an international commercial real estate advisory firm. We work with investors and landlords and developers such as Grosvenor Americas, Imperium Blue, and many others. Also with occupiers such as Anytime Fitness and Waxing the City. And we are also a commercial real estate training firm, and we work with people such as Royal LePage Commercial and CBRE, as well as a host of independent commercial realtors.
Well, you're a busy dude.
We are trying to keep ourselves busy, yes.
Yeah. Did you mention that you also teach?
Yes, I do teach with a number of real estate boards, and I work with people all over the world. So it's a fascinating thing because commercial real estate is not uniform across the globe. It's quite interesting. Even the way that we quote rents depends upon where you are. For an example, in some parts of the United States, you quote rents on a monthly basis, not on an annual basis. But if you go to Shanghai, you quote rents on a daily basis. And this goes back to historic times when the ships would come in and tie up because Shanghai is a free port, and then they would just sell their goods off the ship at the port. And so you would only book the port for the number of days that you had stock in your ship. So they quote rents on a daily basis over there.
It's interesting. They, in the States, from region to region, they quote rates differently also.
Yes.
I can remember in California, they quote rates on a monthly basis.
Yes.
In New York, they quote rates on an annual basis. And in the 80s, when I moved to New York and I started doing some commercial brokerage work, I got to see, I was accustomed to, now this is in the 80s, that maybe $1 a square foot in California. And all of a sudden I'm seeing $20, $30 a square foot. And I'm going, oh. Now, the truth of the matter is that there probably would have been sticker shock anyhow.
Yes.
But it took me, the better part of a day or two to get over the shock and realize, they calculate it differently here. That's on an annual basis. So
where I'm from, in Canada, for anybody in the world except for the government, we quote rates on a per square foot basis. But the moment you start talking to the government of Canada, because we're on the metric system here, it's on a per square meter basis. So you have to do the flip in the calculation. And that sometimes is misquoted because people don't do the calculation properly.
Now, I understand that. So why don't we move on a little bit and let's get to the topic of our conversation today. I'm going to start talking a little bit about the retail apocalypse. It's a sexy name and all of that, but we're going to question a bit here whether or not it really is a retail apocalypse, or maybe a retail shift might be a better description for it. I'm going to quote Evolution. I think that's even a better. So I have. I've got to stop saying so. I've got to practice on that. I say it way too much. So? I knew I was going to do that. I did that intentionally this time. I was reading an article that quoted Coresight Research, and let me read that here. That according to Coresight Research, 12,000 stores are expected to close by the end of 2019. They may be halfway there or more. I think they're more than halfway there. UBS Securities Analysts also say that by the year 2026, 75,000 more stores will be closing.
Mm-hmm.
I thought we should mention some recent bankruptcies because this all sounds like an apocalypse right now. So when you present stuff like this in that fashion without talking about it and maybe doing a little bit of a deeper dive, the new bankruptcy are Barney's, but
Yes.
now that's an iconic brand, but I don't think they're talking about more than 14 or 15 stores. So
Right.
that's not going to be earth-shattering except to some of the landlords. And Perkins Marie Callender's has filed bankruptcy, which I have very fond memories of eating their strawberry pie in the spring.
Now, are these Chapter 11 bankruptcies or Chapter 7?
I'm pretty sure they're Chapter 11. So
Yeah,
why
so
don't
it's
we?
reorganization.
Yeah.
The entity's still going to exist. In Canada, we have a thing called CCAA, the Company Creditors Arrangements Act. It's exactly the same as a Chapter 11. So for those of you who may not be familiar with a Chapter 11, it doesn't mean that the whole company is going down and being liquidated. It just allows the company to reorganize its financial affairs.
Well, why don't we talk about that? Because being an attorney who's been in bankruptcy court and somewhat familiar with not Canadian, not California, but United States bankruptcy law, only about 15% of those companies that go into Chapter 11 reorganization actually emerge with a plan.
Yeah.
So
that's the bad part.
Yeah, the percentage is very low. With that being said, why don't I bring you in on the screen? And that's why. There we go. Because this is going to be a conversation.
Sure.
With that being said, retail bankruptcy tend to be a little bit more a little bit different from other bankruptcy. It's not unusual for a retailer to file a Chapter 11 bankruptcy to lop off the losers and to be left with the winners.
Yep.
And
However, Howard, you and I both know, because we've both seen this, that unless the company does a major rejig in its operations, its manufacturing, its marketing, all that happens is you move the line farther up the scale, because you haven't dealt with the fundamental issue that caused those stores not to work. I mean, in many cases, you go into a location and you expect it to work and it just doesn't for one reason or another. But in other cases, it's fundamentally the market has shifted and the company hasn't shifted. So they get rid of the losers and then they say, well, we're going to focus on those ones that work. And then all they find is that the bottom end of the ones that were working are now losers as well, because the market is moving away from that particular retailer or restaurateur.
Yeah, well, that it's interesting because what often happens is that in the bankruptcy, the assets, the locations, are bought out by another company that has different or better plans, including, and it's not uncommon, the management. Management goes, look, there are some bankruptcies that are caused merely because the company has been over leveraged, because maybe they overexpanded too quickly. So their real estate department wasn't very good. So what they do is they go ahead and they expand, 1,000 more stores, and people weren't using their head, and they basically opened up dogs. Not as an example of a dog, but an example of where management bought out was Sears.
Yes.
Sears now is looking to rebuild and rebrand itself as in a different format, without the burden of all of the obligations that it previously had as a larger operating unit. Toys R Us, we discussed that last week,
Right.
They were bought out. They're currently still operating in Europe, and now their concept has changed. I actually did a video with Jeff Edison at Phillips Edison, where he talked about how Toys R Us could do a much better job of marketing their stores and providing a better user experience. So, yeah, bankruptcy is not necessarily the end of things, particularly with a retailer.
Yep.
But when we talk about it, it sure sounds like for retail, the world is ending. Let me mention there was a report that e-commerce is expected to penetrate the market from its current 16% to upwards of 25%. And what does that mean?
Well, that's kind of a double-edged sword because, it depends who's penetrating that market. If it's an existing hard retailer, in other words, a brick and mortar retailer, all they're doing is expanding their sales online. They don't need as many locations, but it doesn't mean that that retailer is being usurped by a competitor that is purely online. In fact, we're seeing the other thing happening, where a lot of pure online retailers are moving into physical locations because they need that branding and that ability to get eyeballs in front of their brand. So they go into shopping centers and they go into physical locations. So I do think, though, that it will have an impact on the amount of retail space that it will be developed into the future. And we're seeing, again, that evolution where you have tertiary properties and maybe even secondary properties that need to reevaluate how much retail space they have, whether they even need to exist. Do they become mixed use? And so I think the only thing that we can take out of this is that the commercial real estate industry is changing rapidly. And you need knowledgeable people, such as a very knowledgeable broker and lawyer, such as yourself, Howard,
and a broker such as yourself. Well, I'm a broker too.
Yeah, to stay on top of things and have the pulse on the industry, because people are so focused on their individual business, they may not have that global view of things, and that's really important to keep that in mind.
Well, why don't we talk a little bit about what's causing all of these changes in a little bit more detail other than it's evolving? Let's consider some of those issues. So what about shift in demographics?
Yeah, the demographic shift, and also I think more importantly, the psychographic shift. The baby boomers, the cohort that drove a lot of retail, we grew up in an age pre-internet, and we drove the move to the suburbs, and we drove suburban retail development. We were the last group to embrace department stores to the extent that we did. We saw the coming in of the specialty store and then of the big box store. If we look at today's demographics, the younger people, as well as those that have gone into retirement age, they're moving into urban centers for a number of different reasons. They're downsizing. What we're seeing is a demographic shift as far as geography is concerned as well. We're seeing people leave the Rust Belt and move to the sunny climes of Arizona, Nevada, California. In Canada, we see people moving out of Ontario to British Columbia. And so we're seeing a shift in where the supply is and where the demand is. We'll start with that. Psychographically, when I first heard about the internet back in the 1990s, I thought it was going to be a great toy. And now my kids, they're in their 30s. They don't know a world without the internet. And so they're very comfortable being on the internet. I read a story once that the people that get hooked by the internet scams more often than not are not people of your and my age, Howard, but the millennials, the 20-year-olds, because they're so trusting of the internet. And I think that they don't have a problem buying things online and using it as a tool. Whereas, remember I said, I thought it was an interesting game place. They use it as a tool. My son, I'll give you a personal example. He's getting married this September.
As is
What did you
mine.
do? Yes,
Yeah,
that's right.
when is your son getting married?
He's getting married on the 21st of September.
So's my son.
So we're not
Now
doing
we
it
we both
21st
know that our sons were getting married, but they're getting married on the same day.
on the same day.
We should get them in touch with each other because
There we
their
go.
anniversaries are going to be the same day.
There we go. But here's what my son did. He bought his wedding rings online. He bought his suit online. Okay. He's got a very particular physique. He's very tall and very slim. So he's not going to rent a tuxedo. So he had to go out and buy something. What did he do? He ordered 3 suits, knowing that he could return 2 that didn't work. And he ordered them in different sizes as well. He ordered 2 different types of rings, knowing he could return the one he didn't like. And so he did all of this online rather than in a physical location, because he didn't see the need to have the physical location. He didn't see the need to go there because the product could come to him. And one of the things I've always said about retail is the fashion stores were somewhat immune to the internet because you really want to try it on. Hey, if they're willing to ship you 6 or 7 garments with the idea you're going to return 5 of them, then that changes the equation. So psychographically, they don't have a problem doing that. I would feel bad ordering 6 things and returning 5. My son doesn't have that problem.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have trouble doing that. I'd have trouble purchasing jewelry online. I have trouble purchasing jewelry from someone that I'm not familiar with. I won't walk into just any jewelry store.
Right.
Jewelry is something that until I have an expert that I trust look at it, I have no clue what it is that I'm really getting. So
Exactly.
buying something online, I don't know about that. And my son didn't buy it online anyhow. So we've got a shift in demographics. Talking about technology as a toy, just quickly, I'd like to digress. It reminds me of when I first saw the iPhone. Now, I'm pretty much a early adapter of technology, and I can remember when I saw the iPhone, someone that I knew had got one, and I looked at that as if it was a toy. So there's no practical use of that, and so I didn't have, much interest. Sometime during the second generation, I think that I was injured and incapacitated in a wheelchair or something. I forgot what I did. And so my wife always likes to buy me a treat. It's like treating children. Oh, poor Howard is sick and unable to do anything. Let's wheel him into an Apple store and get him an iPhone. So I did that. It's true.
Yes.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
So we go into, I say, okay, I'll try out an iPhone, and because I can return it. And I started using it and learning about it, and all of a sudden, what shocked me was the practical use that I could put it to for business. Mm-hmm. That all of a sudden I went, this is not a toy. This can really help me in business. So, yeah, that's my own little story.
Yeah, it's a productivity tool now, and kids today see the internet completely different than we did, and see the availability. And you don't have to look any further than Uber to see how people are changing the way that they look at various things. Newspaper article in Canada today talked about how people in Canada, and bear in mind we have universal health care in Canada, how they want the medical system to catch up to the internet age, because they want to be able to book appointments online, which you can't do in many jurisdictions. Or you have a hospital group that is very tech savvy, and there's another one that isn't. And so, we're starting to see technology starting to create evolution. I'm going to use the word again, in many, many industries. How is it affecting retail? Well, we've talked about that. It's affecting it in a number of different ways. It's opening new channels, but in some cases, it's completely disrupting some retail channels. Music you don't buy in a store anymore. You buy it online.
That's correct. What about watches?
Well, my son bought jewelry online. I don't know.
Well, this may
I've
not.
also seen New York Rolexes too. So
Well, yeah, if you have that's more of a status symbol. Although Rolex would argue it's such a precision timepiece, but I
yeah, but
think
a New York Rolex is not a Rolex.
oh yeah, that's the one that you buy on a street corner.
Right.
Yeah, that's made in Taiwan.
Yeah.
I've got another little story for another day about buying watches in Hong Kong and then deciding I wasn't going to bring them all back and kind of hide them. So I thought that was a bad idea, which was true. It was a bad idea, and it was a good thing I didn't do it. But I wanted to bring up the idea of watches, and this may not really relate to retailers so much, although it might. Any of the stores that focus on watches, unless it's high-end jewelry, I think that is shifting tremendously. My wife wanted me to get a new Apple Watch, which has an EKG or ECG function to it because she worries about me all the time. But I'm a Samsung guy, so I'm waiting for their new watch to come out with ECG. My wife has a Rolex. She doesn't wear it. She wears her Apple Watch.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about these watches, they really only have a lifetime of maybe 4 or 5 years max.
Yeah.
And so then you have to go out and buy another one. But the thing is that they do so much more than another watch. When you start adding the medical conditions, and this is why I was thinking of the watches, is medical care via the internet. Ultimately, I don't know if it provides it now, but ultimately your ECG can be intermittently transmitted to your doctor. I know someone who has this, it's kind of like a patch for diabetes. And so these things, over 3 or 4 days, regulates his blood sugar and automatically does it. He doesn't have to prick his finger. And it sends a message to his phone, his iPhone. And the iPhone then, alerts him if his blood sugar is too high, if it's too low, and it also sends messages to his doctor.
Yeah, we're seeing all of these changes, and we're talking about the retail evolution, but let's not forget about
changes. I'm singing.
Changes. Yes, I know. Don't give up your day job, Howard. But, it's not just retail. Look at restaurants. I know of a restaurant chain that recently opened 80 new concepts on the same day without a physical location. What they did was they created 80 micro websites, each with a different type of food concept, and they're using their existing kitchens to have online restaurants with using services such as DoorDash, Open Door, food delivery services. So we're seeing those kinds of changes as well. If I can open up 80 more concepts without one physical location, that is going to have a disruption in the commercial real estate field.
Oh yeah, and particularly retail. If you can provide food and it's delivered, you don't need a retail location.
Yes, but it's also impacting, if we followed it logically, it's also impacting multifamily accommodations. We're seeing a shift in, again, demographics and psychographics. When I was growing up, yes, I am that old, we only went out on very special occasions, birthdays, anniversaries, things of that nature. And we went out to a fancy restaurant. I remember when I turned 10, I had to wear a suit and a tie to go out for my 10th birthday. And it was to a very nice restaurant. Now, kids are eating 4, 5, 6, 8, 12 meals or more a week away. And I know of a developer that developed a building in Victoria. There are no kitchens. There's literally no kitchen in the accommodation. It's a living room and bedroom.
Well, you raised the point of the next thing that I was going to talk about, which is buying habits. Buying habits have changed. People go out to dinner much more often. I hear things as well. It's the millennial generation. Well, I don't know. In my family now, we go out far too much. We hit a recession. That's going to become a problem for existing restaurants, which is another topic. I had to write that one down.
Well, let's talk about that one for 30 seconds. In the news recently, Pizza Hut. Pizza Hut's going to close 700 sit-down restaurants. I'll tell you. They're going to close 700 sit-down restaurants. And what are they going to do? They're going to replace them with takeout and delivery. So a much smaller footprint. The existing franchisees are going to have, these first shots at the delivery and takeout. But if we look at what does that mean, it's going to mean that they don't need servers. Or as many servers. It's going to mean that their kitchens are going to become more compact, so their overall footprint's going to be smaller. Now, what's going to happen with these sit-down restaurants? Who's going to take those up? There's going to be 700 opportunities for new restaurants in communities across the land. And as Pizza Hut's parent company said, these operations fit their time, fit the demographic, fit the locale, fit the geography 30, 40, 50 years ago, but they don't fit them now. And so while we see in closures 700 Pizza Hut locations, we'll see openings of 700 takeout and delivery locations, and we'll still have another 700 new restaurant concepts if they're backfilled with restaurants. Or they may just blow them up and do something else with, which is perfectly fine. I think, again, the big thing that we need to keep in mind is commercial real estate is accelerating in its change. Before, it used to take decades for something to change. Now we're seeing it take months.
How small do you think that these locations can go?
Domino's operates in as low as 500 square feet. I think that if you're focusing on delivery and takeout, you don't need a very big footprint. You basically need a kitchen and a front counter.
Yeah, no, I agree. So we're getting back to the change in buying habits. So we're talking about restaurants, if I may digress again. Mm-hmm. Here's, one of the things that has been bothering me quite a lot here in Las Vegas. Obviously, anything that's on the Strip is like tray expensive, but that seems to have spread to the suburban areas just outside of Las Vegas. So even where I live in Summerlin, it's the restaurants. You find a lot of restaurants, and they are very more expensive than what I've been accustomed to, and even in Southern California. Probably not as expensive as in places like New York or San Francisco. The problem is that I'm beginning to see a reduction in value. Mm-hmm. So I'm seeing people opening up restaurants, famous names, fancy, small portions, which is okay for me because I can't eat that much. But the value is, the service is terrible, the food is so-so, mm-hmm. and I'm thinking of that in terms of another discussion that we're going to be having is what's going to happen when we start seeing an economic downturn, and
those people are just trading on the celebrity of the brand. And I had an interesting discussion with some people the other day, and we were talking about what consultants call right sizing. And I'm going to loop this back around to Pizza Hut. Right sizing for consultants, and specifically in the conversation we were having, was the size of the bag that you buy in the grocery store is the same, but the amount of contents is smaller, so they didn't have to jack the price as the ingredient cost went up. So you could still buy the same product, and I'll pick a number off the top of my head, for $4.99, but you got $3.75 worth of product. And it's consultants use the euphemism right sizing. Well, that's exactly what Pizza Hut is doing. Yeah. And I think that what we're going to see with an economic downturn is we're going to see a wholesale right sizing where people reject or can't afford these things. And I don't think we can look at retail, staying on topic, in isolation of what that means for the general population. And what I mean by that is, as I alluded to with the Pizza Hut, you're going to have a whole bunch of people that are going to need to find new employment. And how is that going to affect? Does it become a self-fulfilling prophecy? I joke, half joke. No, I'm not really joking when I say that Walmart manufactures its own customers because it has a whole bunch of part-time workers. It doesn't pay benefits. Its wages are at minimum wage. If you look at what Walmart, and I'm not picking on them because I can say the same thing for a number of other ones, but Walmart is iconic. Everybody knows what a Walmart is. It is a discount retailer. And so if everybody is in the same boat of all having gig type economy jobs where you're going from one job to the next job, or you only have work at a minimum wage job, then you are going to be forced into that realm. Well, if you're forced into that realm and you're still wanting to keep going down to the lowest common price denominator, people like Costco and Walmart are going to continue to have to drive down prices. And what does that do for the economy? We saw that in grocery stores when self-checkouts turned into, I'll check myself out. We no longer have that line that was 1 to 16 items and you have a checkout person there. No, you have 4 machines and 1 person to monitor what's going on. So are we doing it to ourselves? I think we are a little bit. I think that the consumer has shot themselves in the foot a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. We're looking for things less and less and less and less expensive. Probably on another show we'll talk about the effects of the very low unemployment rate and what I'm seeing as a result of that. But let's save that for another conversation. Let's move on to the question of whether or not retail overbuilt.
I think that we're at a tipping point. I think that we're at the point whereby the premier retail will continue to be premier retail, but if you're looking at a tertiary property, a secondary property, you have to rethink that property. I think we need to bifurcate the market a little bit more into impulsive purchases in retail, and for that I'm talking shopping. Major regional shopping centers. Those are where my wife says I'm going to go shopping, and she's basically saying I'm going to go see if there's anything that's going to interest me today, and if it does, I'll go buy it. I'm a buyer, I'm not a shopper. And then we have the convenience at the other end of the scale, whereby it is close at hand and I can go do that. And I don't have to travel halfway across the city in order to get to the mega mall. But the stuff in between those two things, I'm concerned about. I really am.
Yeah, I think that it depends upon geography and location and region. There's some places it's overbuilt and other places it's not. But again, this all comes back to the concept of there's so much shifting going on. There's shifting of populations. There's shifting of buying habits. There's shifting of e-commerce versus brick and mortar. There's so much shifting going on that you have to really, really, really pay attention and then guess in the future. So I think someone who's a good operator can still have problems if they don't adjust, if they don't move their cheese. I don't know if you ever read that 1 Minute Reader.
I did.
If they don't pay attention and move their cheese, they're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, and I think you also stumbled on or you may have done it on purpose. We were struggling, is it the retail apocalypse or is it the retail evolution? I think it's the retail shift. We have to keep shifting. We have to, Muhammad Ali, there's a name from the past,
float like a butterfly and sting like a bee.
Yeah, and you've got to be able to sort of say, where is that jab going to come from in the future, and can I react to that now? And I know in speaking with owners of retail properties, office buildings, warehouses, and basically every asset class, they want to know what's going to happen tomorrow. They don't want to know what's happening today or what happened yesterday. They can read that in the newspaper. But the true thing that they're looking for is, can you help polish my crystal ball?
Yeah, I agree. So, unless you've got something else to talk about, I do have one more item of this topic.
I want to talk about one other thing.
Well, before we get to that, because this
Okay.
is, I'm not going to
Okay.
close the show.
No, no,
What
no.
I'd like to talk about is that we hear, and you touched on this with Pizza Hut.
Yes.
We hear all about, the news headlines are about all these store closings. The news headlines are about bankruptcies and, things are going on, things are shaking. Actually,
Yes.
the camera was just shaking. And we worry all about that. But these reports rarely, I might add, and I'm not saying that there aren't going to be people who are going to have problems, but these reports rarely talk about the openings.
Yes.
And
All
again,
the new concepts.
yeah, this is shifting. You used Pizza Hut as an example. As well, like, wait a second, Pizza Hut may be closing, 350 of their weaker locations that are more of a sit-down type situation, but they're going to reopen another 5, 6, 700 of these smaller locations to fit their demographic, to fit their business model now. And that's not taken into consideration. And I think it should.
Well, I think if you look at a report that just says there's going to be 75,000 stores closing, the question you have to ask is, well, what's going to go into its place? Or, that report was just on closing. And I'd have to search out another report to say, well, yeah, but there's going to be 95,000 locations opening. And, media is great for always talking about the bad side of things. And because that's what gets headlines and that's what gets eyeballs to TV or ears to radio or on the internet. There is some really good news out there. I read a story about that. I don't know if it's good news or bad news. I honestly, I don't understand this one. And that is that Whole Foods has just partnered with Packed Party, which is a startup, and to do in-store party stores. And interestingly, today as well in Canada, it was reported that Canadian Tire, which is not a tire store, it's a mass merchandiser of hard goods, is just done an acquisition of Party City for 57 locations to do store-in-store. Plus also they're going to have Party City merchandise. Party City is kind of like a dollar store on steroids. It isn't just a dollar store. You can buy $5, $6, $8 items in it. But they'll also be offering all of that merchandise in their 500 existing Canadian Tire stores. So I think that's good news. I'm all of a sudden puzzled as to what is it about party stores? I don't get it.
If you're asking me, you're asking the wrong guy.
There's experiential, but and parties, I guess people are spending more money on parties. I want to think about that one. I want to do some research. And if anybody is going to comment on this show, please educate me, because I don't know.
Well, let me ask you this question. Aside from the party store concept, what does it mean that Amazon and Whole Foods are doing these things with other concepts? And then I'm going to mention a few other concepts that are similar.
Yeah. I think that what we're seeing is the drive to market share, to foot traffic, to blurring the lines. What does that mean for retail? Oh my goodness, Howard. This is good for a whole show on its own. Use clauses and exclusivities. We touched on exclusivities and restrictions last week. We need to talk about it more. I look at what's happening with Tim Hortons. If you're not familiar with Tim Hortons, iconic Canadian coffee donut shop, then it was bought out by another firm that also happens to own Burger King and Popeyes. And they introduced the Beyond Meat burger, which is a vegetarian burger. But, oh, wait a minute. All of a sudden I have a coffee donut store that just dropped into its menu hamburgers. If I have Tim Hortons and I have an exclusivity with A&W, McDonald's, even Burger King, as a landlord, what does that mean? If I'm a franchisee for A&W and I see Tim Hortons all of a sudden going off into this, we're now a general restaurant concept, what does that mean? And I sense that there's going to be a few challenges in the courts of the land because of what's happening.
Well, that's on another whole topic of exclusivity provisions. I was thinking that there's a lot of collaboration and partnership going on. Walgreens is, you're going to see more medical offices connected with CVS and Walgreens. You're going to see health clubs collaborating with the whole idea of, if we could generate traffic together, we're all better off, which is really the concept of a shopping center, is to get people into the center. But now it's kind of a little bit, I need to get people into the CVS. I need to get people into the Kohl's. How do I get people into Kohl's? Well, people can return their Amazon products at Kohl's now.
Yep.
Right? So it's because if people walk in and return their Amazon products at Kohl's, well, gosh, I bet you the return is in the back of the store, not in the front of the store. And you have to walk through the store. And guess what? On the way there, you go, well, maybe I should have just bought it in Kohl's.
Yep.
So it's the partnering and the collaboration. The Tim Hortons example. Well, you see that if you travel from Los Angeles to Las Vegas and you stop off at a gas station, they now have these convenience stores that are a combination of Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, and you name it, and on and on and on. And, it's almost a food court type concept.
Yeah, we have the same thing here. Tim Hortons is in a lot of gas stations with a little fast food outlet as well. We reported last week about GNC closing out its mall locations in favor of boosting its Rite Aid store-in-store concept.
That's who I meant to mention.
Yeah, so we got all of these things that are occurring. And as we said off the top of the show, the retail apocalypse evolution comes shift. And I think we just have to try and stay ahead of it. How one stays ahead of it in a contract that is future looking for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, I think is going to be a challenge as we go forward. And it's worthy of that discussion we are going to have about what protections can a retailer, particularly a smaller retailer that gets whipped around by the bull that is a large international brand. Those are things that we need to talk about a little bit more in this industry.
Well, it's almost you're going to need to have a research budget or maintain enough flexibility. I'm experiencing this in the brokerage business here in Las Vegas. I think ahead. Oh gosh, we could do this, we could market this, etc. But getting people to buy into that is extremely difficult because everybody is worried about making the dollar today.
Yeah.
And
the whole thing of opportunity zones, which I know you are an expert in, is very much everybody's jazzed about it, but opportunity zones are a tomorrow thing, and they're not looking at it today. And I think that that's short-sighted. And this whole conversation is actually spinning on the concept of what is the shift? How do I future-proof my business? Where do I look into the future? And we're using examples from what's happening today and what has happened. But what we're really saying, I think, Howard, is you can't think of today. You got to think, what's going to happen 3 years from now? What's going to happen with technology? What's going to happen with the demographics and the psychographics? Are we looking far enough into the future with commercial real estate? Or, and this is my bugbear with a lot of brokers, are we involved in the immediate transaction?
It's the immediate transaction. I can't say that I blame that. I mean, you got to earn money right now in order to put food on the table, and it's extremely difficult. Perhaps this is a bit of an aside, but as you well know, I'm very much into technology, social media, online marketing, and all of that, and that takes time. And when you're trying to focus on that, when you're trying to learn, in my case, everything that there is about opportunity zones, and you need to be creative, and you need to analyze, and you need to figure out how these rules apply, even when the rules are not yet completed, that takes away from the immediate transactions that you could be working on. And I'm having conversations with people about it, and they're going, you got to pay attention. You got to, make your 100 to 150 calls a day, yada, yada, yada. And I don't know that I'm that kind of guy. I'm really more of the guys, let me go out there and convince everybody that we know what we're talking about. And if you want to hire, and we had this conversation, if you want to hire a transactional broker who can find you the location, then hire the guy out there whose depth of knowledge is de minimis. Or if you want a partner, you want someone. I have to change this because when I'm shaking the table, the camera probably shakes.
Oh no, but that was an emphasis, Howard.
Yeah, it was an emphasis. Yeah. If you want a partner, then you need someone who knows what they're talking about and knows more about the topic than you.
It's interesting because in my advisory and training work, I spent a lot of time talking about what needs to occur in the future. That, whether I'm talking to real estate agents, I talk to them about try and anticipate what your client wants in the future, not what they need today, just what they need today. Yes, meet that today, but try and figure out what they want in the future. In my advisory work, my clients want to know what is going to happen tomorrow and how do I prepare for that? Or, at the other end of the scale, I'm dealing with a lot of clients that are saying, I have an immediate problem, I have to get that fixed because they didn't look into the future. And so the future caught up to them and now they got a problem. It's easier to fix a problem if you can try to anticipate it. The trick, though, is to try and anticipate the correct thing into the future that could come up and smack you upside the head. Because the thing that's going to get you every single time is the thing that you don't know.
Oh, don't I know that?
But you're 100% correct. A little bit of an aside, but you brought it up. And so I'm going to give some free coaching to any real estate agents that are looking at this. You're a commodity if your client is saying to you, you're cheap and I need you. You are in the transactional world. So commodity is the lowest level, no loyalty. I mean, I'll switch agents tomorrow. You're at the transactional level is if your client says, you can meet my need for what I need today.
Right, where they tell you.
Yeah, I need this spot leased because it's vacant. And you have the knowledge in order to be able to do that. Come tomorrow, I don't necessarily need you because the transaction's complete. You become a strategic advisor if you can help your client anticipate the problem that they're going to have tomorrow and solve it for them before it occurs.
Yeah.
And that's where, good people like yourself, and if you think about it, I mean, you're a broker, you're an attorney, you know about opportunity zones, which is a thing for tomorrow. You've got all of this going on. People should be knocking on your door right now saying, Howard, we need to sit down. I mean, you shouldn't be making phone calls, 100 and 150 phone calls a day. You should be receiving 100, 150 phone calls a day. And I hope the people that are watching this pick up the phone and call you, because I know you're going to give out your contact information at the end of the show.
I will tell you, I haven't really started marketing the video and blog that I wrote about what you need to know about opportunity zones. I simply have put it on the website. This morning I had sent it out to my email list, but as of this morning, I've already gotten 3 telephone calls off of it.
See, I mean, those are people that understand that there is a shift. And while we framed the whole thing in retail, there's a shift in commercial real estate. And you got to be ahead of it. You really, really do.
Yeah.
And you got to think about what's going to be happening tomorrow.
Yep, you bet. Anything else? Any other words of wisdom?
I don't know if I have words of wisdom. I have a lot of opinions, and I have no problem standing up on my soapbox. I don't know if they're words of wisdom, but no, I think we've exhausted this one. But we have opened up a lot of avenues to talk about into the future.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, Peter, once again, it's an absolute pleasure. This is not work for me. I just like talking with you. You and I could go on and on and on forever, and I hope that the listeners and watchers will enjoy this, and I really, really, really am going to try to get this and last week's show edited and out the door. So,
fabulous.
With that being said, this is CRE Radio and TV. This is Howard Klein and Peter Mars. Peter, why don't you mention how people can get a hold of you?
The easiest way to get a hold of me is through my website. It's got all of my contact information there, and it is www.greensteadcg.com. Let me spell that for you. GREENSTEAD, C as in cat, G as in golf.com.
And you can get a hold of me, Howard Klein, at howard@creradio.com, or you can call me at 702-706-4433. That's 702-706-4433. And that's it for the show.